Welcome, Daily Huddlers, to Wednesday, when we talk about all things relationships and communication. I'm going to start us off with a quote today. This is one you've probably all heard before, but when we talk about relationships and communications, it seems like it's just that much more important. So this is from Mahatma Gandhi. You must be the change you wish to see in the world.
Knowing a little bit about what we're going to talk about, that was perfection, Kathryn. Thank you, thank you.
Of course.
One of my favorites.
Welcome, everybody, to Wednesday, where Tara and I are going to host you through a conversation about relationships and communication. We are so passionate about this because we know that through relationships and better communication, we can change the world. So before we get started, I'm going to ask a few questions. I'm going to start with my friend Sorrel. My favorite question. What time is it, Sorrel?
Tara, the time is now, Kathryn.
Or Kathryn. Either one, that's fine. That's right, Sorrel. The time is now. The time is now. There's no other time. So, Giovanni, you're my next one. Where are you and what are you grateful for?
Tara?
Yes?
Let me see the time. Let me look around. It's now. The time is now.
It is.
Can't quite escape it. And what am I grateful for? Gosh, today I'm grateful for community. It's so great to see all of you today. I'm grateful for community.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you. And Stan, I've got a question for you.
Yes, Tara.
I can't with it today. This is killing me.
Oh, that was Kathryn. I'm sorry, Kathryn.
That's what you get for
This is
not
great.
telling a joke, Kathryn.
It's in the space. I know.
I'm sorry, Kathryn.
Stan, how are
Yes.
you? And who are you going to hug today? And it better be me.
You know what? I'm going to hug Kathryn today. Nice hug, Kathryn. And, I'm just grateful, because I am the way I say I am. And today I'm grateful.
Mm.
Good day
I
to
love
be
that.
alive. Good day to be alive.
I love it. Thank you. And I'm going to land us by saying where I am, which I am right here with you all today. And I too stand and so grateful for that. I'm going to turn it over to Tara, who's going to introduce our guests and get us all ready for this conversation. Tara, the real Tara.
That's right. Good morning. Welcome to the Daily Huddle, where I think it is the very best way to start your day. Most of you know that I'm over the moon excited about our guest. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about him and a little bit of background about why I'm so wildly excited. Neal Foard spent 25 years as a creative leader in advertising and marketing. During that time, he created award-winning campaigns for global power brands like Budweiser, Lexus, Sony, and many more. And as the creator of an innovative presentation series for global advertising agency Saatchi and Saatchi, Neal was named their worldwide director of creative learning. No surprise there. He has been sought out as a consultant on creative messaging for Fortune 500 companies and universities, and been a featured speaker at TEDx conferences. But what we're here to talk about today is the following that Neal has built as he shares stories on social media about the better side of people every day. Before I turn the microphone over to Neal, I have to give a big thank you to my good friend, Tyler Robinson. He is here with us this morning. And I have to share just a quick story. My last storytelling workshop that I launched, Tyler said, hey, you should check out this guy, Neal Foard. And that was how I learned of your work on social media and your beautiful, beautiful, heartwarming stories. And I started watching his videos, and they all come with this beautiful lesson. Some of them we know, some of us remind us, but he also his stories were the perfect example of the art of story. And so I used his videos to share with my tribe in the storytelling world. So really virtually, I have just fallen in love with this man. So I thought to myself, you know what? I'm just going to ask him if he'll come on the Daily Huddle. I have nothing to lose, and here he is. So Neal, before we talk about the question of today, what I would love to hear you share with us is a little bit about how you started this platform, which I think started on TikTok, where you've got almost 200,000 followers. It's on LinkedIn, it's on YouTube, how you started it, and what was that inspiration?
Well, the whole impetus for doing the videos on TikTok was a small company that I'm part of called Within. We didn't have any kind of marketing budget, and because we had nothing to work with, I just thought, well, I'd start posting some videos on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is a magnificent little community. It's sort of not Facebook, it's not Instagram. It's a lot more focused around business. And they got a kind of weird traction. I noticed people were reaching out to me in really nice ways. I got a lot of positive comments and feedback. And my daughter was particularly enchanted by one story in particular, that because she never knew her grandfather, my dad, it was her way of understanding what kind of man he was and our relationship. And it was called A Postcard from 1969. And she said, hey, you know what, let's put this on TikTok. And while we were having breakfast, she put it on TikTok. And inside of about an hour, while we were in the restaurant, it had like 60,000 views. And she says, Pop, I think you just went viral. And so I really? And we sat there, the two of us, pretty much the whole day, just watching it grow until it had crested 1 million. And that, you know, what happened, Tara, is I got sort of hooked because of thinking, wow, people really seem to like this. And that's led to this sort of regular rhythm of stories from, you know, I'm almost on the cusp of running out because they're all based on things that have really happened to me. But that was the story. So that was the sort of origin story is, wow, these things have gotten popular. Let's keep it going.
So tell me what inspires you to keep it going? Like how do you see it affecting others?
Well, you know, it's funny that the quote of the day that Kathryn had pulled out was that Gandhi quote about be the change that you want to see in the world. It was a little like that in that I typically don't use social media. And the reason I don't is because there's a kind of, it's sort of bile coming at you all the time. People are arguing, people are negative, they're expressing themselves in sort of ugly ways about just trying to, when I say ugly, I'll give you an example of how I mean it. They'll post pictures of their car, their fancy vacation, they will humble brag about, oh, I'm so humbled to have won this award. Yeah, you're humbled. That's why you're telling everyone on earth, and on top of a soapbox with a giant megaphone. Your intention isn't to spread goodness. Your intention is to make everyone jealous. And I don't see the purpose of that. I don't see the value in trying to make everybody jealous. How about this? How about you try to make us all feel like we belong together, and that the experiences we have are in order to reassure each other that on this journey we're on, we're in it together. There's no reason for us to try to make ourselves out to being superior to anybody else. And one of the things that Sorrel had said this morning that I was not familiar that you guys did, which is, you know, where are you this morning? I'm here with you. Oh, what time is it? It's right now. Oh, these people are my tribe. These are my friends, and I don't even know you. And I love the use of a medium for that purpose, to reassure each other on this journey. You know what? There's no reason to be afraid because we're in this together and we'll take care of each other. I just think that's fantastic. Inadvertently, thank you, Tara, for the invite, because it looks like we're all part of the same crew.
Oh, I feel that so much. You know, I listened to you talk about being humble, and I think it was Giovanni that reminded me of the Eckhart Tolle quote that if we say we're humble, we're no longer humble.
Yeah. Right. Oh, yeah, you're still humble. Yeah. What award was that again?
I think, yeah, exactly. So I'm curious about these stories. You say you're almost out. Can you give us a little bit? I mean, they're so beautiful. If you all have not checked out his site, I mean, you just watch a video. It's almost as heartwarming and igniting as the Daily Huddle. Where do they come from? Tell us more about where they come from.
Yeah, well, for the most part, they really happened to me. And the rationale behind that is that we are bombarded every day by media that is expressing how awful people are. So, for example, it isn't hard to find somebody yelling at a barista on video or saying awful things to people, slurs of some kind or another. You don't have to go very far to see that. And what's more, you're quite familiar, I'm sure, with the phrase in televised media, if it bleeds, it leads, meaning that if there's some disaster or some awful thing that have happened to people, they'll put that first on the news to heighten your sense of terror that the world is out to get you. And that hasn't been my experience. What I'm used to is 1,000 very small courtesies that people do out of instinct, whether they're holding the door open for you at the gym or expressing some kind of kindness or laughing together on an elevator with somebody you don't know at all. That's been my experience. And yes, of course, I've run into my own cases of road rage and so forth, but that's not the rule. That's the exception. So what I was intending to do was saying, look, however it is that you're being told elsewhere, this is my experience. These are the things I've lived through. And when you go back and you reflect in your own life, I'll bet you could come up with a lot of stories of things that you've done or that your friends have done that sort of pleasantly surprised you with how courteous they are or how giving or how impressive they are as people, just because they'll do things without self-aggrandizement and without wanting credit or money. And so when I say I'm running out, truthfully, all I really do is I just pull out my notebook, and I go, okay, all right, just pick a year. Try to remember that year. And inevitably I'll come up with something that was reassuring about our life experience together.
I would imagine so. I teach, when I teach to the storytelling tribe, I think it's partly a practice that you have to exercise your mind to be constantly kind of looking for these stories. But I wonder, I know we've got a lot of business people on here and they're working to build more story into their lives and their conversations in an authentic way with an intention of something similar to yours, that it touches people. And so with that, I wonder, do you have any type of strategy or is it just like you just naturally get up there and just riff?
I don't typically just get up and riff. I have these things that have happened to me. And by the way, Tara, it's a funny thing. Over the course of telling these stories, I will discover that my version of it sometimes isn't somebody else's version of it. So, for example, I would tell this story about my sister Lily when she was a savings and loan manager in Berkeley, California. And I've told the story probably a good 50 times. And I said to her, hey, Lily, you remember that story? And then I told it to her and she said, that's not what happened. And I went, what? And then she told me a very different version of it. And so just advice to everybody on the call, please don't ever get arrested, because whatever eyewitness they produce probably didn't see what they saw. And I'm trying desperately to reflect some sense of reality. Although what happens in the human mind is it creates a narration that's convenient for a 3-act structure, as opposed to, so to get to the nut of your question, on behalf of people that want to be better storytellers or hone their skills there, the best advice I got was drive to a point. Don't just cite events as they happen. There really needs to be, why am I telling you this? And my intention is to communicate some principle. Sometimes it's just to make you laugh, which is fine, or it's meant to reflect the better side of human nature. That's my favorite thing to do, is to tell things that really did happen in my life that reflect people are a lot better than you may be giving them credit for. Certainly that the news media is giving them credit for. Mm-hmm. People are great. They really are. Yes, of course, we do negative things. But if you can drive towards a point that is, this real event with real people, ended with this uplifting last event. That's a very powerful thing to leave people with, because not only have you entertained them or driven them towards some logical conclusion, but you have reassured them in such a way that they're going to go out into the world and reflect that energy back. In the principle of pay it forward, I almost hate that it's kind of a meme to use that term.
Right.
That it's so common, because that's the truth of it. If you reflect goodness into the world, it will reflect it back at you. And yes, there's always going to be somebody who takes advantage of that and who could ruin your day if you're not careful. Except that in all the times I've been traveling on Earth, only twice has something negative happened to me. Twice out of thousands of interactions. And yes, I had my pocket picked in Barcelona. And yes, I was mugged in Argentina. But to be fair about the mugging, they were in the middle of an economic meltdown. And the fact that, trust me, it was a pretty genteel mugging. This was not a professional. This was somebody who, in retrospect, I got to hand it to them how gentle the whole thing was. Okay. So even that was a reassurance that somebody had been driven to it, that they weren't an evil person. So let me go back to the point. Sorry, Tara, you let me go, I will go. You don't realize how long
All ears, man.
flywheel is on this thing. But to return to the point of the storytelling, if you just begin with this principle, this is going to end with a moral. You're already way ahead. Okay. And then the second thing is, I heard Van Neistat, who I'm a huge fan of. Van Neistat has a YouTube channel. His brother Casey Neistat is sort of the original storyteller on YouTube. And Van Neistat told this story where he said he'd had an interesting thing happen to him, which was, it started out quite tragic. His son had gotten quite sick and he was in the hospital, and he was sort of frantic in the hospital, and he was in the waiting room, and a very nice woman said to him, "Oh, it's tough being a dad right now, isn't it?" And he said, "Yes." And then he looked up, and it turned out that it was Whitney Houston. And he said, now I could have told that story very differently, which is, I could have said, "Oh, I was in the hospital and Whitney Houston was there." But by doing it that way, anything that I say after that is sort of gassed. There's no, now it's just a series of events with no logical beginning, middle, and end. It's just details. Okay, so it meanders. So every story should have a sort of mystery to it, and then a punchline. And if you go through your own life and real events, you will usually discover that there was some meaningful moment that makes a good ending. And whether it's something funny that happened, but you leave that to the end. And what I've discovered in my own life is, life doesn't come with theme music. There's nobody telling you when you should be afraid, or when something important just happened, or that you just met the love of your life, right? There's no soundtrack of strings that tells you that moment. So you have to be kind of on the lookout for, in looking back, you can put your own music on it and add meaning to it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for those reminders. We're gonna be up with questions here in a few minutes, and we haven't even gotten to the question of the day. So this is, I think, just listening to you, I feel your heart and why you do what you do. So maybe let's dig into that question. This is what you wanted to discuss a little bit, was how do we speak to people with whom we disagree?
Yeah, it's kind of my favorite topic, because when my father grew up, he grew up in the Depression, and his recollection of it was that, yeah, it was rough. And in his childhood, he spent quite a few days hungry, literally hungry. But that back then, people supported one another. People leaned on one another. There was a sense of national, we are all together here, and we'll get through this, but you got to be able to lean on people. And we're at a sort of an opposite place right now, which is, yes, there are people going hungry, but for the most part, people are fed. And yet we feel like we we're enemies. We feel as though, states literally want to secede from the union now. What the heck? What is going on? We need to take a calming breath and realize that whatever our political differences, I'll bet you that if we were locked in a room together with a task to perform, and we just didn't know our political orientations, we'd sort of wind up friends. As long as you don't grind an axe, as long as you don't walk through life trying to win, that instead that what you do is you try to learn from people. You try to accept that they have a different life experience that you have and express curiosity. So because this topic has been on my mind, my number one rule for everybody that is interested is you can go a long way for yourself if you just go in with this assumption, because this assumption is probably true. The person you're talking to is a good person. I know it may not seem like that, or you have been bombarded with propaganda that says they're not. You've been bombarded with propaganda that says you're surrounded by enemies who want to victimize you. It ain't like that. That's not my experience. My experience is most people are pretty good. They're pretty cool. If you just grant them that license at the beginning, that most people are good people, and that's the energy you reflect. And here's the second thing, that you do yourself an enormous favor if instead of trying to suss out what political party somebody's from or hit them immediately with a hot button issue, do this instead. Just be curious about where they come from and what their influences are, and grant them some latitude of forgiveness for not seeing the world the way you see it. If you do that, I think you're going to be rewarded with meeting somebody you're probably friends with. I'm not coming into this phone call seeking our differences. I'm sure if we tried, we could come up with something we don't agree on. But where's the joy in that? Why would you do that? What are you hoping for in that exchange? You're hoping to find the things that wedge you apart? Well, congratulations, you found it. Now what?
Right.
Now, what joy have you found from this? So I have given myself the gift of, and it has been a gift, of saying I'm going to assume that the person I'm talking to is a good person, and any disagreement we have, we could probably figure it out if we had to.
I love that. You know what? I think so many of us deep down know that, and you're so right. We forget it every day. And I just wrote down, stop trying to win and seek to learn. And that's just such a beautiful way of just leading into every interaction. I'm going to open up the microphone to my co-host, Kathryn, and see if she wants to kick off some questions or commentary.
This has been fantastic. Thank you so much, Neal. I really want to open it up to hear what other people have to say. Because honestly, to your point, I want to learn. I want to hear what else is out there. I have lots of questions for myself, but I've learned so much already. So Sorrel, he raised his hand right away.
I'm just eating this up. Neal, thank you so much for being here. I'm so curious, when you're creating stories and curating them, typically, how much time do you spend until you go, now it's ready to tell?
When I started Sorrel, the standard was, as I said, my daughter, who I love, never knew my father. And sorry, that gets me. That really gets to me, that he never met her. And so my standard is, okay, I want to tell her about him. And so I will often tell stories about the two of us, my father and I. And the standard was just, is this gonna make him wish she'd known him? And so from then on, it all became about like, if I want to tell a story, would somebody listening to this story feel like they wish they'd been there? And so it started out, it was pretty easy to reach that quickly. And now I find myself typing and retyping these things so that I make sure that I get all of the points I want to get in there, to the point where, so well, it's going to take me a couple hours at least to really settle on everything, to not leaving out something important. And by the way, I noticed in the notes on these things, somebody said the best bartender in Chicago is a great one. I'm so glad that Tyler saw that one. That really happened. And although there are some details that I changed, to keep it nice and tidy. But that line and that story about like, I think you may be the best bartender in Chicago. You may applaud.
One last thing.
Your Russian accent's amazing.
Yeah, that was my attempt at Polish. My father-in-law was Polish, and I could never quite get it.
One last thing for me, Neal. What's your favorite part of the process?
Let's see. So my favorite is trying to find the quote that will match the sentiment. So I will, as I said before, I'm always trying to drive towards a moral. There's a reason I'm telling you this story. I want to leave you with some sense of goodness or some inspiration for the day. And to that end, I just delight in finding a quote. It's like, oh yes, that's it. That's exactly what I'm talking about. I'm telling a story. The video that I shot last night for TikTok and YouTube was about a friend of mine who he writes letters to kids on Save the Children. He sponsors kids on Save the Children, and they ask you to write letters to them to make sure that the people, so that the kids know that somebody out there cares about them. And he does these really dense letters, like many pages. And I said to him, really, these kids will read those letters? And he goes, well, I don't know whether they'll read the whole letter, but I want them to feel like they're being heard. Like he'll take their letters to him and he'll take every question and answer it robustly. And when I was looking for a quote that would be appropriate to that was like a really cool part of the mission. I think that's my favorite part.
It's really, really inspiring to hear how much work and effort and heart you put into this. And we have a couple other questions. I know we're up on time, but I would be remiss if I didn't share quickly. When I listen to you talk about your dad, it makes me think of the question I get so often from folks who are trying to work on their stories. And there's this, it feels like, I don't want it to feel like acting or feel like it's inauthentic. And I always say this to people. I say, it will always be authentic if you just allow yourself to relive the story as you tell it. And I'm wondering if that is part of how you come over so very genuine and authentic with all this work you put into your stories.
Authenticity, Tara, boy, you're identifying a giant topic. And I'm sorry, I've chewed up all this time on you, but you got to watch out for me because I'll just go. But authenticity, which to me is the main ingredient for powerful storytelling. How much time do we have? Do we have like more than a minute, or are we on?
We can go a few minutes over. We don't like to, but I think today we'll give it 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay, so I want to tell you a true story. I watched a presentation to 12 businesswomen, and in this presentation, I want to describe the salesman who was trying to sell something to this group of women, and he was really nervous. And his pitch was to stand up and pull out a piece of paper and read word for word, not that well, his sales pitch. And he was quite nervous. He only looked up once from the paper, and then with no call to action and no clear understanding of the price or anything, he sat back down. And you would think that given that description of his presentation, it's permissible to say, well, he probably didn't sell any. But no. Every single woman in that room gave him an order. And on top of that, he sold out his inventory, and he got a few compliments on how well he'd done. And so you're thinking, well, how is this possible? Well, he was 7 years old, and he was trying to sell cookies that he and his sister had made so that they could afford to go to summer camp together. My point being that what's at work here is not being slick. In fact, the slicker he was, the more likely that would have been interpreted as creepy. What was important was, what is he there to do? What is the emotion he is leaving with his audience? And clearly the businesswomen didn't necessarily need the cookies. They're not buying it for that reason. They have an entirely different reason for buying. My point being that if you are straight up just trying to offer some value or being authentically yourself or you're reflecting your real self to the world, it is astonishing the license and the grace people will grant you. People think that they're supposed to make a presentation. No, what they're trying to do is be persuasive. They're trying to, the more persuasive you are is because you're trying to help. To the extent that you are reflecting, I think this is going to benefit you today. It kind of doesn't matter how slick the storytelling is or how practiced or how professional you seem. Oftentimes, the level of professionalism is kind of a warning. Like, are they trying to bamboozle me or cheat me here? I think people overestimate being, professional as somehow that's a good thing.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, and then we're going to close it, and then we're going to go off live, and then whoever wants to stay on can stay on. Go for it, Paul.
What Neal just said reminds me of that phrase, all sizzle, no steak. You're more sizzling, show me the steak. So the more slick you are, it's really the meat of the matter, and not all the bells and whistles.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of people are swayed by that, so you have to be careful.
Wow. Thank you for that reminder, Paul. I'm starting to stress because I promised people a half hour, but Neal, if you can stay on, we do have, I want to try to get to a few other questions if you have a few minutes, but I'm going to close out the live Facebook and apologize to the Facebook questions. Feel free to join us and hopefully Neal will come back. And I'm not going to not end this with reminding people of our 7 tenets. Love, lead with love, laugh, throw your head back and take some time to laugh out loud. Give with all your might, your time, your spirit, give of yourself, eat more plants, get your sleep and stress less. And at the end of the day, don't forget to move that body, move what your mama gave you. Until next time, Daily Huddlers, we love you and we thank you. And Neal, if you'll hang on here with a minute, we still have a few more questions.
Thank you, everyone. Miss CC. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, CC.